Begin today on Daf Kuf Gimel Amud Beis at the Mishnah on the bottom of the Yamad. Zok the Heilige Mishnah, HaMekabel Sadeh Mechaveroi, a person that receives a field from his friend to work in it. This is whether he's working in it with the deal of a oris that pays a certain percent of the produce that the field produces, or as a choicher, which is someone that pays a set amount for no matter what this field produces. V'hi beis hashlochen. This is a field it's a dry land, and you have to constantly take from the water of a stream of water, of a river of water, and water this field. And there's a stream of water there that you're able to water it. And this worker accepted the work because of the stream of water that's there. It's a field that has in it also trees that are growing there. If this stream dries up, or or the trees that are there get cut down, so now the worker loses out from this. He doesn't have the stream anymore available for him to be able to do the work so easily. He doesn't have the fruits that he would be able to get from it. But nevertheless, he's not going to be able to deduct from the percent that he made up to give to the landowner. He can't deduct from it, even though now the conditions change, and he says, look, I don't have now this stream of water here, I don't get the fruits from the tree. But it wasn't a clear agreement that the amount that he's giving to the landowner was because of that stream of water, because of that tree. So therefore, if it wasn't spelled out, he doesn't deduct anything if it dries up or that the tree gets chopped down. But if the worker says, Chakar Lisa de Beis HaShlachin, I want you to give me this field, Beis HaShlachin, to work in, and to make the deal of Chakira or Oris. Stay Beis HaIlon Zeh. Or he tells him clearly, I'm going to work for you in this field which has the trees in it. So then, Yovesh Hamayan, if the stream dries up, the tree gets cut down, so then he deducts from the percent that he gives the landowner. Because he made it clear that he's taking it because of the tree that it has in it, or the stream of water that it has in it. Frek the Gemara, huh? Yeah, that's what we'll see here in the Gemara. Taisus brings, goes on both. Frek the Gemara, hey Chidami, what are we talking about over here when it says that the stream of water dried up? If the case over here is that there's a big river that passes by right by this field, and this river dried up, why can't he deduct from the percent that he pays the landowner? He should say to the landowner, Makkis Medinahi, that there's a Makkis Medina, there's something that happened here that affects everybody around here in this country, and because of this, I could deduct from you. This is based on a Mishnah that we'll see here later in this Pedic that explains when you have something like this, that the conditions of this field totally changed, not just here, but B'chlal, in the whole area, the conditions changed. He got the field in one condition, and now the area completely changed, so then he has to pay him less. So over here, if that's the case, he should pay him less. Rav Papa explains that no, the river here did not dry up, but the Yavish Nara Zutta. Over here there was a stream of water that comes from the big river. There's a smaller stream of water, or maybe canals of water that come to this property that dried up. So for this, he can't deduct from the money that he owes the landowner. The Amalei Iboilach Lasuya Bedavla, that you're going to have to go now and bring with pails the water into the field. So the water is still available, you just have to work a little bit harder. And if you didn't spell out clearly in the beginning that you're only taking it because you have easier work, so then you're not going to be able to deduct from the percent you give me later. Rav Papa said regarding the two Mishnayos that we learned here, this Mishnah here and the Mishnah before, in the beginning of the Pedic, Hani Tarti Masnita, both of these Mishnahs, the halachas in them, Kamai said it is, both of these first two Mishnahs in this Pedic, Mishkachas law, Bein b'chachranusa, Bein b'kaplanusa. The halachas that it said in them applies whether it's a choicher, whether it's a kablan. A choicher, again, is the person that just pays a set amount, no matter what it produces, and the kablan is the one that gives a certain percent of what it actually produced. Both of these Mishnayos, the halachas in them apply to both the choicher and the kablan. What here refers actually to the beginning of the first Mishnah of the Pedic, where it was speaking also both about a choicher and a kablan. It spoke there about whether you're going to cut the grain by the time of harvest or you're going to uproot it. The halachas over there applies to both. But the Mishnahs later here in this Pedic, from here forward, the next Mishnah going weiter, the isa b'kablanusa, lesa b'chachranusa. The halacha of the Mishnah that applies to the kablan does not apply to the choicher. Or the isa b'chachranusa, lesa b'kablanusa. And other Mishnahs Their halacha applies only to the chaycher, and it does not apply to the kablan. And we'll see as we go along later in the Mishnayos. So some Mishnahs apply to the chaycher, and some apply to the kablan. It will be explained as we learn it. So the Mishnah said that if he said to him that you should give me to work in this beis hashlachin, so then in such a case, if the stream dried up, or the same if the tree dried up, so then he deducts from the percent that he gives the landowner. So the Gemara asks him this, why, if he said to him this language that I want to work for you in the beis hashlachin, why do we say that now if it dried up that he deducts? The landowner should say to him, Shma ba'alma amrilach. It's just a name of the area. This is the way people refer to this area, that it's called a place of beis hashlachin. But I didn't use this term because it meant that it's an actual agreement that only if it's a beis hashlachin, that will be the deal between us, but if it dries up, it's not. And the Gemara here brings a source for this, what we see in another place when it comes to selling properties. Mi loy tanya. Didn't we learn in a braise? A person says to his friend, Beis kur ofar ani moichelach. I'm selling you a beis kor ofar, a property which can produce a beis kor of produce in it. That's the term that was used. Even if there's less, half of that amount that it can produce, so what he got in this property is what he bought, and he can't have any tightness to him that you didn't give me, what we made up, that you're going to sell me. Why? Because when you use this term of beis kor offer, it's an area that people refer to as a beis kor offer. But he wasn't selling him a place that's actually a beis kor offer. It's only a name for this area. And obviously you can't just come and say this about any place. If it's actually a place that everybody refers to it with that term, a beis kor, so then even if it doesn't have the actual beis kor, it only has a lesach, which is half that amount, that the sale is in effect for what it is. Similar, if a person says to his friend, Karmani moichelach, I'm selling you a vineyard, and then you come and this property, it doesn't have a single vine in it. So, but nevertheless, the sale is in effect. Because he's selling him a place that has the name vineyard. And that's taki if it's a place that everybody refers to it as a vineyard. Or a person says, I'm selling you an orchard. There are no pomegranates that grows there. The pomegranates is the main trees that grow in a vineyard. So he got whatever it is. He only sold him a place that has this name. Because everybody refers to it with this name, a pardis. So Alme, we see from this Braise, that the landowner says when he sells with these names, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has these qualities. It could be just a name that everybody refers to it. If so, Hachanami here as well, name when the Mishnah says that he's selling him a beis hashlachin or a beis ha'ilon, it doesn't mean that it has to actually have that stream of water there or it has to actually have the tree. It just means that it's a name that people refer to it this way. So Shmuel answers like Kashya. There's no question from what the Braise says, because there's a difference. It depends who is saying to who. In the Braise, it's the landowner that's telling the worker that I'm going to be giving you a property that's called a beis hashlachin. So then you could say that he's just giving him the name, so he should know which property he's referring to. He's giving him the name of the property that everybody calls it with that name, but it doesn't mean that it has to actually have the stream of water there. But here it's the case where the renter, he tells the landowner, I want to work for you in this property which is a beis hashlachin. If it's the landowner that's telling the choicher, the worker, so then you could say he's just telling him that this name that he should know what he's referring to. But if it's the worker that tells the landowner, I want to work here in this beis hashlachin, that we understand that he's particular. He's telling him exactly what it is in order to have that stream of water there. Shma ba'alma kapeda, yeah. That's one pshat. Shmuel's pshat. Ravina says another answer. Idi v'idi the omale machkel l'chaycher. Well, now we could say just like the Braise speaks where the landowner is giving this name to the one that wants to buy or wants to work there. The same thing over here is also in our Braise, in our Mishnah, that is, where it's also the landowner that's telling the worker that I'm giving you this beis hashlachin. But over here, it's different. Mit the Ka'amar Zeh, in our Mishnah, the Lashon is that he tells him, Beis HaShlochen Zeh, or Zu, or Beis HaIlon Zeh. He says, this one. What does that mean? If he says this one, Meklal Dekoy, Begava Askinon. So that means that he's standing in the property. If he's not right there, he wouldn't say Zeh, this one. So if he's standing in the property, so Beis HaShlochen Lamalei Lameimar. So why does he have to spell out that this is a Beis HaShlochen? You stand there. You see which one he's referring to. You can't say that he's using the term Beis HaShlachim because he wants to give him the name so he should know which property he's referring to. It's not just the name. He's standing right there. So the only reason he's saying it is the Ka'am Alei Beis HaShlachim Kedekay Mahashta. He's using the name Beis HaShlachim not to identify it by name, but actually to tell him the condition of it, that I'm giving you this property with this condition. Whereas in the Braisa, when it said that it's just a name, it's because he was telling the buyer, that property which is called vineyard, I'm going to sell you. He's not standing there in the vineyard, so then it's just a name. A worker that received the property from a landowner to work in it for him. And he didn't do the work, he left it empty. So now here, this Mishnah is talking about only a oris that gives a percent of the actual produce to the landowner. We're not talking about a chaycher that no matter if it's produced, it didn't produce, he pays a certain percent. Here we're talking about the percent of what it actually produced. And what happened? Vayivira, he leaves it empty. He doesn't do any work in it. So he makes up with the owner that I'm going to be your worker for the season, I'm going to take care of it, and the percent that it produces I'm going to give you, but then he doesn't do the work. Shama Naisa, so we have to evaluate this property, how much it could produce in this season, and then then he's going to have to pay him and give him that percent we evaluated. Because Shakach Kaisivloi, this is what you write in this document between a worker and a landowner. What's usually written in this document is Im Oiver. If I keep the property empty and I don't do the work in this season, Ashalam b'metova, I'll pay the best, meaning I'll pay from the amount that it usually could produce. So Rashi here explains it's talking about a kablan, that you have to say here that you evaluate and you give the amount that it could have produced. If we're talking about a choicher, that you pay a set percent regardless if it produces or not. You don't have to evaluate anything. They already made up a set amount that he pays him. So this Mishnah is talking dafka about the kablan or the oris. Sagt the Gemara, Rab Meir hoyedeirish loshen hedyet. Rab Meir would expound on the language that's written by plain people in documents, even if it's not a language that's written in a document that Chachamim instituted to write. It's just a language that people write in documents, but based on that language, he would understand it and use it to determine what the terms of this agreement is. Just like the Mishnah here. The Mishnah is mentioned because the terms in the document between the between the worker, the oris, and the landowner is that so the Gemara brings now here a bunch of different things where you see that you can understand what the agreement is based on the language in a document. The Tanya, as we learned in the Braisa, Rab Meir says, that it says in the document of a worker that if I keep it empty and I don't work, I'll pay you from the best. So that's what the halacha of what our Mishnah said. Rabbi Yehuda, similar, Rabbi Yehuda Yedairish Lashon Hedyet. Rabbi Yehuda also darshaned. He would explain what the language of a document means. The Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda said as follows: Adam mevi karban ashel alishtai. A husband is the one that's obligated to bring the karbanis for his wife. Meaning, if he's rich, when it comes to certain karbanis, like by a metzora and different cases, so it's called karban oile v'yored, which means if you're rich, you bring a large carbon. If you're poor, you bring a small carbon. What happens if a person's wife is poor? She doesn't have any money of her own. But the husband is rich. The husband is the one that brings the karbanis for his wife. So if he's rich, he brings the karbanis on his level of being rich. V'chein kol karban v'karban she'icha yeves. Every carbon that she's obligated to bring, the husband has to bring it for her. Shekach kaisivla. This is what the husband writes to her when he gets married to her. Achrayis the islech. The responsibilities that you have, alai, is upon me, min kadmas dna, even from before. So what this means in the gersa that we have here in our Gemara, that if a wife comes into the marriage and she had already obligations of karbanis from before the marriage, but now when she has to bring it after she's married to him, the husband says, I take the responsibility to bring those karbanis even from what you had upon yourself from before. That's the gersa in our Gemara. Rashi here actually brings a different gersa that it says in, I think in the Teres Kayanim. There the gersa is that when she gets divorced, so she writes to her husband, she writes, not he writes to her. When they get divorced, she writes to the husband, any responsibilities that you had for me to provide for me the karbanis that I have to bring, you're potter now. You don't have to bring it anymore from when we are divorced. So based on that, we understand that up until this point, he has to bring her karbanis. But according to Rashi's Gersa, he doesn't have to bring the karbanis that she was obligated from before the marriage. It's only from when the marriage began. Another thing, Hillel Azaken or Yadayrish Lashon Hedyet, Hillel Azaken as well would expound the language of documents of plain people. The Tanya, as he learned, it says in the Braise, that is, Anshe Alexandria, the people of Alexandria, Hoy Mekachin is Nashiseyim. They would be Mekadesh their wives. And Mekadesh is the first stage of Kiddushin, and it's not the full marriage, is Nisuin, when they then come to live together. But here, it was just Kiddushin. But then, when it came to the second stage of marriage, Ubishas, Knisas and L'chuppah, when it came to the time of the actual chasana to enter into the chuppah, when they're going to be fully married, Ba'amachedim, V'chayt v'maisam. Others would come and grab away their wives, mehan from them. Ubikshu Chachamim lasas b'neiim mamzerim. So the Chachamim wanted to establish that those people that grab away these wives and they marry them, their children are mamzerim. Because after the first stage of marriage, this woman is a Eishes Ish. And now these people are grabbing away the wives and are marrying them. Eishes Ish, a child born from a woman that was an Eishes Ish, is a mamzer. Amalan Hillel Azaken. So Hillel Azaken said to the Chachamim, Heviu li ksuba simchem. Bring me the ksuba of your mother. Let's see what it says in the ksuba, and then we'll see if the children are mamzerim or not. Heviu li ksuba iman. They brought the ksuba of the mother. Umatza shekasaba, and they found that the language that's written into the ksuba is likeshetikansi l'chuppah. When you enter into the chuppah, the second stage of marriage, havo lila into, then you will be my wife. So based on this, he said, so what's being written over here? That the Kiddushin is only taking effect on condition that the second stage of marriage will happen. Only after the second stage of marriage, then we say that the Kiddushin will be a Kiddushin. But if the second stage of marriage never happens, then the Kiddushin is not a Kiddushin, so they're not an Eishes Ish. Based on this language that's written in this Ksubah, the children were not referred to as Mamzerim. Another situation where you can darshan the Lashon that people write in documents. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha Yadayrish Lashon Hedyet, the Tanyas, we learned in the Braise. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha Oimer, Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha said, Amalvas Chaveiroi, a person that lends money to his friend, and now the person is not paying, and he wants to collect a mashkin, a collateral. Lo yimashkenenu yosim mechayvei. So when you send the shliach of the bezdin goes to take a mashkin from the borrower, don't take a mashkin that's more value than the loan itself. Shekach kaisav loy, because people write in the document as follows: Tashlumte de islach alai kol kabel dechi. That with this payment that I have to pay you for this mashkin, it's all according to the value of the mashkin. What this means is, when you take a mashkin, so the mitzvah in the Torah is that you have to return the mashkin to the person, to the borrower that gives you the mashkin at night, if he needs to use it at night, or by daytime, if he has to use it by day. And sometimes when you get this mashkin, you return it to the borrower for an extended period of time. And now you want to get back the mashkin, or you want to get the payment based on this mashkin. So they would write into the shtar that the payment is going to be according to the value of the mashkin. That was the lashon that they would write. So because of this, they instituted you should not be taking a mashkin that's more than the value of the loan, because if you are, so then you're going to end up collecting more than the value of the loan, because of this lashon that it says that you're going to collect based on the value of this mashkin. Okay, that's what he learned out from this lashon of the shtar. Now the Gemara explains this lashon that was written here. Taime the cost of lehachi. The reason why the lender can collect from the borrower based on this lashon is, in other words, he can collect from him the value of the loan based on the value of the mashkin. That's only because this is what was written into the shtar. But if he didn't write this, then the lender that got the mashkin does not acquire the mashkin. But for the Gemara asks on this, but Rabbi Yechanan said, Mashkenoi v'heishiv le'a mashken. Person that receives a mashken and returns the mashken to the borrower, umeis, and then the borrower passes away. Shoimtoi malgabe bonov. He's allowed to grab the mashken away from the children. What's the chiddush of what it says here? Usually when you come to collect a loan from Yisayim and from the Yarshim, you could only collect from properties. There's a shibud on the properties. But from any movable items, any valuables, you're not allowed to collect the loan from the Yarshim, from the inheritors. But over here though, when it comes to this mashkin, since the lender received this mashkin already, once he receives the mashkin, there's a kinyan that he has in it. We learned before in the Gemara about this. Once you get a mashkin, there's a kinyan on the mashkin. And now even though you gave it back to the borrower, but because the lender had a kinyan on it, after the borrower passes away and this mashkin is into possession of the borrower, he can, or the children now that is, he can collect from this mashkin for his loan. So if that's the case, why is it necessary to write into the shtar that I'm going to be able to collect from this mashkin, the value of this mashkin, even after I return it to you? This is the halacha minat Torah, automatically, that when you get a mashkin, there's a kinyan. You acquire now the rights to collect from this mashkin, even from the assignment. So why do you have to write this into the document? Answers the Gemara, ahani ksive legiroin. The reason why they're writing it into the document is if the value of this mashkin goes down. Because what happens when he gives it back to the borrower? The borrower uses it, and the value of it goes down. So over here, you're writing into the document that even if the value of the mashkin itself that he was kind of goes down, but nevertheless, I should still have the rights to collect because of the kinyan that I have in the mashkin, the full value of the mashkin, even if the value of the actual mashkin went down. That's why it's necessary to write this language into the shtar. Another case, Rabbi Yossi Hayedairish Lashon Hedyet. Rabbi Yossi would also expound the language that people write into a document. The Tanya, as we learned, Rabbi Yossi says, Mokim shenagu lasais ksube milve goive milve. In a place where the minig is that you write into the ksube, and the language is written into the ksube is written like you're writing a loan, like any case of a loan. And Rashi explains what we're talking about over here is, in a ksube, there are things that are written into the ksube which the husband owes his wife, but it's also written into the ksube what the husband is going to receive from his wife, what the father-in-law is going to give, the dowry that he's going to receive. So just like the husband writes to his wife, the amount that he writes into the ksube that he's going to give his wife, he's going to give that amount that he writes. It's just like a loan. A loan, the amount that you write in a loan, that's the amount that you owe. In the ksub as well, the amount that's written is the amount that you owe your wife. And the same thing, the father-in-law that writes a dowry, the amount that he writes that comes into the ksubah, that's the amount that he has to give. Rashi says that we're talking over here about the nichseit tzayim barzel, the amount that the husband owes. The reason why we're referring to this like a milveh is because of the nichseit tzayim barzel. What's the halacha of nichseit tzayim barzel? That's the properties that the wife brings into the marriage, that the husband takes full responsibility, that if he dies or if she's divorced, that she gets back the value of those properties in the exact condition that they were when it was married. Even if the value goes up or down, it changes, it remains like tzayim barzel, it's like iron, it remains as is now. Just like a loan. You borrow money, you have to pay back exactly what it was when you borrowed. There's a place where the meaning was different though. Lichboil, if they would double the amount, then Bava Metzia. What this means is, if the minig over there was that the husband wrote into the shtar that he promises his wife to give her a certain amount, and it's really an exaggeration. He's writing double of what he actually gives. You want the ksubah to look nice and beautiful, he's giving his wife so much, they would write double. But really, he's only giving her half. The same thing is also with the father-in-law that's writing into the shtar, into the ksubah, that he's going to give him this and this amount of dowry. Whatever it is, it's really only half that you have to give. So you follow the minig of how people write into ishtaris. Now Nahar Beloi, the people in the city of Nahar Beloi, go butilsa. They would only collect a third of the value that was written into the ksubah because they inflated the amount much more than 3 times more than what it actually was. Mereimer, however, Mereimer magbe nami shvache. He would collect what was written into the ksubah, even the added amount, even if it was written double than what they actually intended to give, but nevertheless he would collect it all. So Ravina asks Mareimer on this, but Vatanya, we learned in the Braisa, as just quoted, Lichboil Bava Metzia, in the place where people write double the amount that they're actually giving, so you only collect half. So why did you collect the entire amount that's written into the ksubah? So the Gemara answers like kasha, it's not a question, because if there's a special kinyan made for this amount that's written into the ksubah, so then you can't say that it was written as an exaggeration, it was written double. If there's a kinyan made, so then you have to pay the full amount that's written. If there's no kinyan made for it, so then you go by the minig, the lashon that people write, that we know that it meant that you're only going to give half of what's written. The Gemara brings a story that happened to Ravina Mashbach, the Kos of Lebrate. Ravina also wrote extra. He was mashbiach. He wrote double of what he intended to give the dowry for his daughter when she was getting married. Amrulei, so they said to Ravina about the ksubah that he wrote, Nikni minei demar. Let's make a kinyan for the amount that you wrote into the ksubah. So that's going to actually obligate him to pay that full amount. Amalahu, so he said to them, Imikne loy michbal. If you want me to make a kinyan for the amount that I'm writing into the ksubah, so I'm not going to write it with a double amount, and I'm going to write the actual amount that I'm going to pay. Imichbel, if I'm writing into the ksubah the double amount, so it should look nice that she's getting extra, then loy mikne. I'm not going to make a kinyan on this because I'm not actually giving the full amount. I'm only giving half of it, and that was the minhag. They would write double, and I'm not going to give the whole amount. There was an individual, the Amar Lahu, that said to the people regarding his daughter that was getting married, and this is a person before he was passing away, so he said to people, Havullah arba meye zuzil lebrati biksubasa. Give for my daughter 400 zuz in her ksubah. So now it's not clear how we should understand what his intention was. Did he actually mean that the dowry should be 400? Or did he mean right into the ksubah 400, which then means that he only gives half of that? So Shalach Ravacha Bered Ravivila Kamed Ravashi, he asked Ravashi the Shaila about this. Do I say Arba Meya the Inun Tamni Meya? Did he mean that he's actually giving 400 zuz for the dowry, which means that if you write double into the ksubah, so you write into the ksubah 800, or Arba Meya zuzi the Inun Masan? Or did he mean right into the ksubah that we're giving 400, but he's only giving 200? Ravashi, so Ravashi says, it depends what language this person used. Chazina, we have to see. Iyoma havula, if you use the term havula, give for her, so then Abba Meya Zuzi, the Inun Tamne Meya. So then give means that he's taka going to give 400, so you write into the ksubah 800. Iyoma ksuvula, if you use the expression write for her, so then that means Abba Meya Zuzi, that he says write 400 zuz, the Inun Masan, which means that he's really only giving half, which is 200. That's one version of what Ravashi answered, how you analyze his language. Ikadamri, others said, Amar Ravashi said, Chazinon, what we have to see is, I Ama Liksubasa, did he say with a lamed? For the ksubah, Arba Meya. So then it means Arba Meya Zuzi. So then he's saying, for the sake of the ksubah, I'm giving 400 zuz, the Inun Tamni Meya. So you write into the ksubah 800. But Vi Ama Biksubasa, in the ksubah, so then he's just referring to what you write in the ksubah. Arba Meya Zuzi, so then it means you write into the ksubah 400, the Inun Masam, which means that he's only giving her 200. But now, on this second version, the Gemara says, V'loihi, this distinction, whether it's with a beis, biksubasa, or liksubasa, that's not a difference. Leishna da'ama liksubasa, v'leishna da'ama biksubasa, Arba Meya Zuzi, the Inun Masan, we always say that it means that he should write into the ksubah 400, which means that he's only giving her 200. Da'ama havula stama. Unless he says, like the Gemara said in the first version here, he said havula, and he didn't say the word ksubasa. He just said havula, give for her 400. Then we know that he actually wants to give her 400, and you write into the ksubah 800. Now the Gemara, after brought all these different cases over here, where you analyze a lashon hedyet, where you can learn out from the languages that the way the minhag is, what people write in documents, the Gemara comes back now to the halacha of the Mishnah, which spoke about a worker that did not work the property. His deal was he's going to work and give a certain percent to the owner, and he didn't do his job. So there was a story with a person, a person received the property to be a worker in it for the landowner. And Omar, he tells the landowner, if I'm going to keep it empty, I'll pay you 1,000 zuz if I keep it empty. So what happened? Oiver tilsa. He did work in the property, but a third of it he did not work, he kept empty. So now the third that he kept empty, so does he have to pay now a third of this 1,000 zuz that he said he would pay? So Amri Nedoi, so Nedoi says, do you know who the halacha is? The Yavle Tlas Me Tlasna Tlasavatilsa. He is going to have to give 333 and a third, which is a third of the amount he said he would pay if he keeps it all empty. So he kept a third empty, so he's going to have to pay that amount. Rava Omar, Rava says about this, Asmachtihi. When a person says that I'm going to give if I keep it empty, he's just saying this as an asmachta. We had this concept of asmachta before in Eizon Neshech, which means that when a person sometimes promises a certain amount, if this and this happens, he doesn't really mean it. He's just trying to guarantee the owner that I'm going to be faithful and I'm going to work and you can rely on me. So he's saying this as an exaggeration, but he doesn't actually mean to obligate himself to give this amount if he doesn't do it. And vasmachta lekanya, using this language that he just wants him to rely on him, it's not an actual kinyan, it's not to be taken seriously, he's not going to owe this. So now, based on this psak of Rave, now the Gemara asks from our Mishnah here. According to Rave, what's different from what we learned in the Mishnah? The Mishnah said when you have a worker that doesn't do the job, Im over, so they used to write into the star. Im over veloy avit. If I keep the property empty and I don't do my work, ashalom b'metov, I'll pay you the best. I'll pay you that percent that we made up that I'll give you from the produce here. So the Mishnah, you clearly see that this is not taken just as an asmachta. This is, he has to actually pay this. And says the Gemara, Hasam loika gazim. In our Mishnah, he didn't say any kind of exaggeration. He's saying, based on the produce of what this field could produce, that a percent of it I'm going to give to you. So if he didn't produce that amount that he was supposed to, so you evaluate it, then he has to pay that percent. But we'll see over here he comes and says, I'll give you 1,000 zuz. He's just saying a outrageous amount, or an amount that's more than what the field could produce. He's just exaggerating, and it's not to be taken seriously. Okay, now another case where a person did not do exactly what he was supposed to do, the work in the field. There was a person that accepted this field to be a worker in it to plant sesame seeds. Now, the sesame seeds, there's two things about the nature of planting sesame seeds. Number one, their value is higher than the value of wheat. And number two, because it's a better value, so it actually draws out of the soil much more energy, and it weakens the ground more than the wheat when you plant wheat. So what happened? He didn't plant sesame seeds. Zara chiti, he planted instead wheat. But what happened? Of the chiti kishum shemi. What happened is the price of wheat rose, and now the price of wheat was just as valuable as the sesame seeds. So Rav Kahana thought to say that actually he could deduct from a percent that he has to give to the landowner, because the landowner actually gains here, because he has the same value with the wheat as much as the sesame seeds, and he actually also gains that his property was not used up, the soil wasn't weakened as much as the sesame seeds. So Ravashi says to Rav Kahana, Omri Yinchi, people say, plant what I told you and let the ground become weak, but and don't plant something else and then take away, weaken my gain that he's supposed to get paid. So he told him to pay this, to plant the sesame seeds, and the deal was that he's going to give him percent of that. So he has to give him what he's supposed to give him, even though now B'Poil he ends up gaining, that the ground wasn't weakened as much. Another case similar, but over here what happened is a little different. Ahu gavre, the kabbalah l'shum shemi, a person who was working in a field, and the deal was that he's going to plant sesame seeds, and instead zarachiti, he planted it wheat. Of the chiti tfei min shum shemi. But over here, what ended up happening is the wheat that grew, not only was it as good as sesames, which is also not usual, but it actually, the value of wheat went up so high that now the value was even more than the sesame that he was supposed to plant. So he brought actually to the owner more value than he was supposed to. So Ravina thought to say that the difference between the value of the sesame seeds that he was supposed to plant and the wheat that he planted, so the difference in the profit here, who gains that difference? The worker. Because the landowner told him to plant sesame seeds. He planted wheat, so the added profit that he planted wheat, that only the worker gets, and the owner has to give him that difference. So the Gemara says, no, it doesn't work that way. True, it's him that he decided to plant here this wheat. It's not the landowner told him to plant something else, but the fact is, where does it grow? It grows in this property. It grows from the property itself. So therefore, just like the worker gets the percent of this wheat, the landowner also has to get the full percent of now the added gain that there is from this wheat that grew from his property. So you have to still split it between them. Okay,